folks, I'm so excited to welcome you all to the Work Blueprint. This kind of show is all about like talking to the best, most incredible thinkers within the space. Today, I am so grateful to be joined by Robyn, and a little bit of back context for everyone. So Robyn and I first met at WPP, and then we followed over into the Warner side as well. So Robyn, I'm going to give you some context on her background, but Robyn, you're going to have to tell the story about your background because it is amazing. So Robyn has spent over 25 years helping some of the world's biggest companies navigate moments that essentially redesign the future of that company. She has led transformations at the intersection of people, operations, and technology, from modernizing workforce strategy at WPP to orchestrating major agency integrations. And now she's right at the forefront of leading the integration management at Warner Brothers. So folks, I'm not sure if anyone's not reading the news, but it seems to be in the news everywhere I look, with Warner Brothers and Discovery merging together with Paramount Skydance to build the next generation of media. So she's become a really trusted partner at the CEO level, right from board and executive. And we are so grateful Robyn has joined us to share some of the learning that she's had along the way. So Robyn, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Siobhan. Yeah, I think you got my story pretty well said, but I think as you and I talked about, when we first met, my background and my career is really taking some interesting turns. I really did start out early days in that dot-com era of being a digital producer and creating, at the time, first ever websites, first ever digital advertising campaigns, mobile campaigns, social campaigns. So my early career was really spent doing the work itself. And then over time, I transitioned into more of a operational management role. I traveled the world helping to integrate new companies and establish operations and ways of working. And then ultimately, continued on that path of operational excellence and leading companies. Probably about 5-6 years ago, I took a little bit of a turn, like you said, during the pandemic at WPP, when I sort of stepped out of, having come off a very large merger with Wunderman and J. Walter Thompson, into thinking about like, what is that workforce management strategy globally for WPP? And it was at a time when we were so used to always hiring externally and bringing in people as needed. And now is a time for us to think about, how do you tap into the people that you have? How do you cast the right team members? And for me, it felt like a moment to kind of come into a specialty, knowing that I'd really come up as a producer, someone who had to think about how to build the right teams, get the right skill sets and experiences, and put them together to deliver great work. So I took that turn. For the last several years, I've been in the people function, thinking about their people operations, their transformation strategy. And only in the last several months have I kind of taken that turn back towards the business to really focus on, like you said, what I'm doing now, which is the integration management office, and leading the global business transformation team for Warner Brothers Discovery. So it's kind of full circle. But as you know, I am a huge proponent of the future of work, of where AI is really going to make an impact. Again, as someone who's like a player coach, I really do understand what it takes to do this at scale and in complex organizations. And I think oftentimes that gets missed. Like there's often sort of this perspective that like you could just force something in or dabble your way in. And it really needs a much more like methodical and thoughtful approach.
Yeah, and I think the thing that's really awesome about your background is you understand the technology, you understand the actual business where we're going to be making those changes, and then you also now understand on the people and the HR side. I think that's a very rare breed. And one of the things that I'm kind of seeing in market, globally as well, there's this like new formation, this new team. So I think the way I would kind of describe it is that, companies have had to borrow capability to figure out how to build the AI-powered workforce, right? But really what's now happening is that customers are now realizing that they need to build this capability inside of their own company. So think of like, the important work, the consultants do, great work and they come in, but essentially think of them as the bridge, not the destination. The destination is driving this out inside of your own organization. And if I was to like sketch up on your whiteboard right now, I would say you need someone who understands tech, someone who understands the business, and someone who's actually sat within the HR team, so understands how that works, who cares
Right.
about people.
Yeah.
So like tick, 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 you got it all
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah.
It's and this is why this conversation, for folks listening is going to be so exciting, because to have that like empathy while also understanding structurally how to make that change at a big scale is incredible. So before we kind of jump into like, I got lots of things I want to ask you.
Okay.
Where do you see the market at? Like, I've got a view of like everyone is kind of hurtling towards AI without a kind of plan. What's your take on AI and what the world is looking like and where we're going to go?
I mean, I think it's certainly starting to feel like it's getting embraced by more of, we'll call it like those who are deeply rooted in the business that they do. I think, for the last few years, it's really been a focus for a lot of the people who are on the emerging side of understanding AI. And now is really starting to take hold in organizations where people are grasping that this is not something that you can look away from or not be curious about. It really is going to become sort of that currency for career advancement, for business advancement. And those who are like, ready to go are gonna, certainly be the ones, sort of thriving in this new world, right? But the ones that are still sort of like thinking they're going to get it done just by like, hey, dabble in Copilot or use ChatGPT, it's not going to drive material impact.
Yeah.
Which is why, as we started working together because I really loved what Reejig had to offer, which is really about like for me and coming back to that COO mentality, that like person who's connecting the business and the financials and sort of performance. It's really about knowing where you're going to get the most impact in the use of AI versus just using and dabbling for AI's sake.
Yeah. And I think where we've seen the dabbling doesn't go well. Dabbling costs a lot of money. You know what I mean? Like with not a lot of outcome.
Right. Or, right. I mean, and again, I have so many friends who are CIOs and who really understand this space. I think many of them are like on the forefront of embracing it. And then it kind of gets like stuck at, okay, you know, we've paid a lot of money for these large enterprise platforms, but we haven't thought about how to pull that through into actually re-engineering work,
Yeah.
people's roles, people's responsibilities. Those are the things that are going to make this take hold.
Yeah. And I think that's where I think when you and I are thinking about understand all your work at the task and at the subtask level, nowhere's even valuable to go after because like some things are too expensive or not even worth automating out and bringing in AI for getting really clear and then reinventing the work itself. Like that's kind of where we see, and to be fair, like you are right. Like I think there is definitely a maturity shift where most customers were in like POC
Yeah,
territory and now they're kind of over that. There's fatigue around POCs. It's like get it into production and like let's start seeing the ROI return on this stuff fast.
absolutely. It has to become something that's sort of like built into the way of working, into the way of operating. And that means removing current state ways of doing work or manual workarounds. And that's the piece that we have to get everybody comfortable about.
Mhm.
And like it's up and down the organization.
Yeah, I think as well, like we're seeing a collective view of CIO, CHRO, CFO coming together.
Yep.
So, like we had Michael Ficaro on a couple of weeks ago on the show, and he's ex Mastercard, and he said it was like a COVID moment where suddenly these teams have to work together in a way that they probably didn't have to work together since COVID,
Yep.
because they're starting to see this like view of like CHRO obviously needs to help with driving out the change and the work design and all of that. CIO owns the tooling, and then CFO is like, how much money are you spending on what? And what is my return? And like
Right.
modeling out people capacity versus agent capacity. So I mean, we used to, when we first started, we sold predominantly with HR. I would say 60% of my buyer now is CIO, and CFO is floating around.
Yeah, I think the
Um,
CFO is the next tier because they're the ones with the pressure. They're
yeah.
the ones with like, how are you going to manage costs? How are you going to get efficiency? How are you going to actually free up cash to invest in new capability and investments? And it's a cycle, right? So the CFOs that are really starting to get this and understand this, I think, are much more engaged than they were before. And the companies that are going to really like, take off are the ones where all three of them come together, to your point, in that moment of saying, like, we have to all own this.
It's really interesting because, when HR folks typically do business cases, a lot of the times they feel more like vitamins than painkillers. Right. So to your point, it's like, how do you, like, there are so many people that join this show who all want to build this practice. They are so excited about the future. They want to build whatever you want to call this team, like work innovation, work architecture, whatever. They are the folks that are excited about seeing the opportunity in their company, building the capability in the business, and then creating like a COE that can sit and feed the business, and help them. So to your point, you kind of have to think about why would my CIO care about this? Why would my CHRO care about this? And also, why would my CFO care? So the case for this has to be relevant to those three personas now.
It absolutely does. And then honestly, like, you have to see the pull through to the P&L. Right? With any big investment of this scale that's actually needed to deliver, you have to see the pull through. You have to start to model that out and see, when is this going to start landing in my performance? I think up until this point, companies have been okay just testing and POCing and trying, but certainly boards are looking for impact. There's just so much more pressure, especially on the public companies, to deliver that level of margin efficiency. So you can see that really becoming the next phase of where I think your platform and tool could really be interesting.
It's, what's funny as well, like your point about the board, we have started getting requests from our customer base now. Can you give me like intelligence that we can send up to the board now? Because there's a whole pile of that happening. So it's interesting. I wonder what's happening in those boardrooms. Are they looking at like all the tech companies and going, these folks are like changing the head count by, like, I wonder what's happening in those rooms. But we're definitely seeing now this like conversation where, I'll tell you something that's very good. It's not just like, how do we cut head count? It's actually like, what is the AI opportunity that exists across all of our work in our company? What will be the impact of workforce? So actually, I would say that's the good story, that like, if that's what they're caring about, they don't just want to be about cut. It's like, okay, how do I think about the next phase of my people?
Yeah, I mean, I recently participated in a training for future board of directors, and one of the areas that they talked about that more boards are interested in are board members who know and understand AI in the future work and what kind of impact that can drive for the workforce, for obviously leapfrogging in capability and offering, but also in the products that are delivered. So I think it's definitely, resonating beyond sort of the boards who were just looking at it in the past for just like, okay, now I can get more cost out of the company.
And it's funny because most of the conversations now are like, so as you know, in Reejig, we tell you the task, the subtask, we give you the new workflow, we tell you how to build the agent, and then they want to track what's the actual changes to the work. Not how many people are logging into an agent. They want to know like, how many hours, what's the velocity unlock? Like, have we actually achieved, if not shut it down? So that's kind of new. And one of the other things I haven't shown you yet, but we can tell you the cost per task, which is based on like, how much does it typically cost for our people to do? We now also have the models of like, what's the token cost? So to your point about the CFO, the reason that we built that was because we were getting a lot of pressure, because you would have seen in the news, everyone's freaking out because like the cost of agents. So customers are saying like, how do we think about like balancing and projecting, like, sure, I'm going to like model like this, but everyone forgot to model in how much what it was costing them. Do you know what I mean? Like they kind of like I can tell you right now,
like, there's the upfront, and then there's the part that comes underneath it, which is like everything that you're paying.
I had in my team this week, and we are AI first. Like we are like designed from like, I got no legacy. We have blown out fast on Claude. So all of our forecasts are completely wrong. And so a lot of what I was looking at with my team was like, hold on, what is this AI usage that's valuable versus what's just someone doing something that could have been done in ChatGPT, a cheaper model, or like just Google it. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like literally like
right. And that's where it kind of becomes like, it starts to kind of like erode from the bottom of the business, right? But hopefully, to your point, like you start to create that blueprint for like what and where do you use each one of these really powerful platforms and tools, and where can you just go with the way that things have been done the last 10 years at least.
Yeah, and it's really funny because like I've got to drink my own champagne, right? So I'm looking at this and I'm like, well, hold on a second. Like we got to get across this. And it really does come down to part of where we went wrong was, I don't know if you've seen Claude Design. Claude Design's
Yeah,
amazing.
right.
So what we've all got is so overly excited that now everything we create in the company has to be designed as it's like we were giving it to WPP. Do you know what I mean? Like everything is so over the top, like produced for an email that's coming to me. I'm like, guys, like we don't need to do that.
Right.
Right?
It's
Like,
time and place for sure.
well,
Yes.
because it's just so easy to take like,
Yeah.
hey, we do these
Right.
rapid docs, which are like, rapid decision making, and like it
Yeah.
has to go up for an approval. Now they're getting completely branded with like beautiful things, and like they're turned into like digital make decisions. Like,
Oh, I love it.
so the
Listen, like
producers
I'm always one
totally
for
get
making things
that.
look like right. It's all about like presentation that matters every day, all day. But to your point, like it can become
That
quite
cost me
expensive.
$10.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's kind of where like this is everybody's kind of new. Everything's new. Like, we're building a $1 billion company with under 100 people, right? And I feel like a responsibility to be really open about where I'm making all my mistakes, because if I'm making them, imagine what's happening in a company with 200,000 people.
Oh yeah.
Can
Right.
imagine the scale of
Yeah.
stuff. So like for me, like part of this is like just saying, hey, like I let go of this for 3 months and it blew out like massively. And that's happening everywhere. And I think like given you have led, I mean, you've done mergers, you've done restructures, you're pushing towards AI first. Given like I'm all in for like sharing the lessons, like what are some of the lessons that you have learned on that journey, like that you can share with folks here? Because there's bound to be a whole pile of like things that have went down during that journey, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of scars. At least
Very
I'm still
embodied.
laughing and smiling, right? I mean, sure, like all of these big, massive disruptions always have like their fallouts, right? I would say, in the past, you could have gotten by like a top-down edict. This is what's going to happen. I would say no longer is that true, especially over the last few years. Organizations and the people within them have opinions, they have ways of doing things, and they need to be brought along. They need to be engaged as you go through this change. So for me, like the big things that I've learned in any of these mergers or even deploying new platforms and new technology is like bring people along with you, get them involved, get them to start to see for themselves how this is going to make their lives better, perhaps, and or just do things in different ways. And every time I think when you do that, you build trust. You create a culture that sort of like identifies, okay, my voice matters. And then those things actually do deliver, right? Like when people feel good, when people feel engaged, when they're learning new skills, you're going to get a higher return. Anytime that I've seen organizations like push these things forward and focus on the logistics or focus on even just like, and again, like I know I have operations in my title at many, many companies. If you just focus on the operations, you're not going to be able to deliver success. And most companies, right, their focus is like driving revenue, retaining clients, seeing growth. All of that it's part of this like whole ecosystem that I do think if you ultimately miss that piece, I guarantee I can plot for you over my career over the last like 25 plus years, the companies that didn't get it, who have fallen down or fallen out of even like top tier, and the ones that did get it continue to thrive, continue to build, continue to succeed. So, I again back to like all of the things that I have, have had responsibility for. I think, those hard leadership lessons are like you can have a vision, you can have a strategy, but you have to bring the organization with you. And there's a lot of levers that you could pull along the way.
It's interesting, like when you're saying that, my brain is triggering me to go be like, there's this debate that I've been having with customers where they're saying, oh, but like the agent will do it end to end. And I'm looking at all the biggest companies in the world. They're not going to automate out with no human in the loop. There is no way you're going to
No
like
way.
vibe code insurance companies, banks, hospitals. So there's always going to be people involved in doing the thing. And if the people don't do the work, then you are not going to make money and you will have a problem. So to your point, it's not even just the right thing to do. It's actually like critical for your business to bring your people on this journey properly, or they will not adopt the new way of working. And then you have a problem, or even worse, like I've had this, like I've been kind of watching the media a little bit. I mean, American media is like intense to watch because you kind of get fall down rabbit holes. But the one thing I've watched is the kind of sentiment shift pretty aggressively in America against AI. There is like a pretty decent, and the assumption is that the young kids are going to adopt this stuff. No, they're not. They're the ones that are bullying. They're the ones that hate it. Like it's, so there's like a really interesting, when you think about companies, and if most of the population is anti something and you still require them to complete work, what happens to leadership? Do people listen? Like that's going to be a really interesting thing.
It really is. Yeah, I think it's definitely going to be an interesting theme. I would say the role of the human, right, becomes even more important in this moment, as we've talked about. Um, People go from being doers, a lot of times over my career, early days, like I did the hard work. I paid my dues. I did very tactical work. And a lot of times, right, like we bring in, sort of entry level, employees who don't want to necessarily do that work. They want to get engaged more quickly. I think this is going to ramp what we used to think of as our doers to be very quickly become managers. And they may not be a manager of a human, but they're a manager of the output. And I think that will drive a different skill set, a different level of accountability. And, I hope that gives people a little bit more like pride in what they do, per se.
So like outcomes. So like an
I
outcome.
think they're more pride in their outcomes versus like I did this task, check.
Yeah.
Right? Now it's like I can really say, here's what I did. Like when I do my performance review at the end of the year, here are the things that we actually did do as outcomes and deliver. So I think if we could start to shift it more towards that, and again, I keep coming back to that people side of things, which is like any way you're going to incentivize people is tied to performance, and certainly, obviously, always pay. But those are the things that I think ultimately are going to need to start converging in this space to get the real pull through.
It will be interesting, that pay point as well. Like what's the if I'm a salesperson and I'm targeted to book 5 meetings a week and I book 7, like what happens in that world? Like does the expectation shift? And I see a lot of European customers that have workers' councils that they're very strict on, like if you go and change someone's job with AI, the resetting of expectations is critically important because you now are measuring someone against a new criteria. And if you don't communicate that, and that's one of the things that's been really interesting, like we've built into the data to be kind of like, here's a predictive view of how fast we could make this or how the outcome will shift with the workflow. But someone needs to have the conversation with the people to say, by the way, like we're now seeing that like our expectation for our team is this, because if no one says it and then you start performance managing people based on the old, like no one's reset, like that's going to be this is why HR is important, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's why the role of HR is critical. I mean, it's really about a reset of role expectation. Instead of measuring meetings, you're measuring output.
Yeah.
And you're measuring potentially, I would hope, more sales and, actual revenue commitments. But, I think to your point, like the old way of managing people's work product is going to change and become much more outcome based. I know those workers councils well. And I think,
so do I, unfortunately.
Yeah. And they're going to have to be managed through all of this change, because the big, I'll call it the more agile, the more tech companies like Reejig, like you guys are just going and doing, right? It's the bigger organizations where it's going to take a real effort to go out and make this material change and get the acceptance.
Yeah. And it's funny because like I've worked across really complex, I'm building a startup, plus I've worked in the tech side as well. And I think there is also like a little bit of over exaggeration even in how well that's going. In some instances, like I'm a completely different example because I've been able to like whiteboard a completely new thing in a different way. If you're a company in any even the tech companies that are, more established, you're still like, once you get over 100 people, changing anything is actually like pretty challenging because you've got core infrastructure that exists. You've got a whole pile of customers that are there. Stuff just happens. You don't want to break too much stuff because you don't want to impact like revenue flow as well. So I also think like there's a little bit of folks are selling us products as well in the storylines that we read. I actually would much prefer in some senses to be on the enterprise side because they've got governance and structure, which means they're not going to just throw it at a wall. They're actually going to have to be pretty intentional about like the redesign. Whereas like we've done intentional redesign. Well, it wasn't even redesign. It was intentional design of the company. Like, should we hit 100 people doing the $1 billion company thing? I don't know. But like the whole test is to see how can you redesign a company? And if you look at like traditional industries, like look at the media, anything that has like people fronted businesses like media, the professional services, these companies are being completely disrupted. Their value position now is so different. In terms of like versus me selling a product, like what's your like where do you see the world of like all of the different kind of like structures of companies going, like when you look at like the different way that they're even going to have to work?
Well, the one good thing, right, is that the reason that all of those companies in particular that are, people-based are where they are is that they've always had the most talented people doing the work. That talented group, is probably driving a lot of what you see on the forefront of those organizations. And then there is the middle, I'll call them like the back office layer that is fairly consistent across the board at any organization that I've been a part of. And I think it's in those areas where you're definitely going to see more need to really like drive AI implementation, more need to get change through ways of working. Over the last several years, we've gone from like nearshoring to offshoring to automation. Now AI is that next frontier. And that's going to disrupt all three of those big sort of levers that have been used around operating, models and efficiencies. So I would say like the professional services groups, they're definitely feeling it because a lot of what they were doing, at least in those parts of the organization, can now be really unlocked and leveraged, and leveraging AI. Whereas I still honestly believe like the people that are doing a lot of the work that we see, on TV or, on an advertising spot, whatever that might be, that comes from creative thought and thinking.
Yeah, 100% agree.
You might use AI as a sort of like a thought starter and accompaniment, but that's the part of like the humanity that I don't think will change.
Yeah.
It's like that's the superpower that humans have in this moment.
I'm your live case study on that. Literally this week, I had a conversation with my marketing team where like, I just think all the Claude design is great, but it all looks the same and everyone's starting to look the same. And brilliant design and creative is like you cannot beat that. That can't be created with an AI model. And like we did our first work with RGA and we'll pretty much be going out and doing like a whole brand. And we were debating like, do we even need to do like a new creative or do we just scale? And I was like, no, we're good. Like the thing that we want to have is that quality, that taste, that creativity, and some of the stuff like on like the wording, the verbal creative, the written creative, like we could never have come up with that in terms of AI. There is just no way.
But the thing that I think is exciting, right, because I've been in those organizations, is that most of the time, like companies will create your brand sort of tone, your playbook, your ethos, right? And then they would do all of the work to create all of the assets and all of the ways in which you can leverage that brand. That's where AI is interesting.
100%.
Right? Just into a platform or tool and boom, spit out,
Yeah, and now it becomes the playbook for how you sell your playbook, like everything. That's exactly, so we're pretty much now like locked in on that next phase, which is like build this, like I don't know what you call it, like build this the brand, the creativity toolkit, create me all of the asset like and animation designs, and then what we will do is that's our IP, and then we own that, and then we scale that through like a Claude design or something like that. That's basically. But I think to the point of like, I'm probably right at the front of like use AI for everything. I'm very clear on where you need the taste, the person, like you just cannot beat that. Like no matter how much you like play one prompt off against and use all of them, you will still never get to a point. And that I think is going to be common across a lot of work, not just like the creative work as well.
Yeah, and I think that's where, companies are going to need to make choices. Like in those, what we'll call it like mid-tier or tactical layer channel executions, you can absolutely use AI. And that is disrupting for, a lot of the communications businesses that have existed to date. But there are other areas where you absolutely cannot like rely on an AI agent and or you start to know that like, okay, this definitely doesn't look right, it doesn't feel right, and it's going to create like a lack of confidence with your customer, with your clients, what have you. So those are the choices that I think we're going to have to find ourselves in. And, most people are learning their way through it. Um, and certainly, the organizations that are advising should advise a little bit on like, here's where you can pull that lever, and here's where I really would say, just don't do it. It's not going
Yeah.
to look.
And in a world where product is so easy to ship now compared to what it used to be, brand is the point where the feeling of your company, like if everyone looks the same and product is going to get to the point where there's pretty much cloning of everything, then that big brand and like how you show up and how you communicate and the experience you give to your customers. And this is not just me talking about Reejig. I'm talking about like whether you sell tins of beans or whether
Oh,
you
yeah.
are like across the board, like everything is going to be able to be built so much easier. Like even look, forget even just AI, look at all the robotics. I've got a little bit of an obsession right now watching on social media, like in China, the amount of robotic stuff that's
Oh,
happening and these robots on the street
scary.
wearing like little skirts and backpacks, it's like hilariously funny. But like
Right.
imagine what's going to happen when you kick in robotics and AI at the same time. That's when it
Yeah.
becomes like a big thing, right?
Oh, totally. Right. Like they made movies about this.
Yeah, exactly.
And we're here. We're almost here, right? And it
And here's me
definitely,
watching them on TikTok.
yeah, you're like, okay, is this real? Is this really happening? And it's closer than we think. And it's certainly becoming a real shift for everybody in that I think when you watch those movies or you saw, okay, that was the future, you thought, okay, like that's 50 years from
Yeah.
now. It's probably like 5 years from now.
Yeah. And you know what's really great to see? I mean, I get a lucky position where I get to see across the board in multi industries, especially customers who, like, if you sell something to the consumer and they also could be an employee, they're very protective of not doing the wrong thing. So, which is a great thing.
Yeah.
So like I don't go and work for companies that basically want to cut X%. The companies that I work with are like, I want to be really bold. I want to keep my headcount flat and I want to increase our revenue profile and I want to be really bold and like redesign how we're doing this. But I also want to make sure that I build the capability in my business within my people and make sure I don't leave them behind, because the reality will be that the job evolution is going to happen so rapidly, especially when you've now got like co-work with Microsoft and things like that are starting to get into enterprise.
Yeah.
That's when you go from subtask to like, I'm doing a task. And I
Right.
think that's where you're going to see a lot of the impact. I think it's not going to happen as fast this year. I think next year is really when I'm starting to like model and look at, okay, because most companies are not allowing that to happen at scale yet. It's really like when that becomes like an approved governed thing in a big company that you'll start to see that. But I think that's the good thing I'm seeing in market is that like the folks that work with me are generally the folks that want to do both. Like they are ambitious and they want to make as much money as they can, of course, who doesn't? But they also have their people at the heart of it, and recognize that there is going to be like some talent shortage, but we got to figure out what that shortage looks like and then how do you rebuild those people. I mean, Reejig is like designed as a name for exactly that moment, right? It's like that whole continuous loop.
No, and I mean, again, back to, why your story and your business really resonated with me as I looked at, where do we go when it comes to like defining the future of AI and work? It's because you're thinking about like the impact to the work, but really about helping to reskill, helping to re-engineer the work product itself and give the people the tools to continue to like, okay, if I'm not, okay, now I no longer need to do this Excel spreadsheet because that's already done for me. What I do need to do is check it, build the insights, and start to see what's going to come next. It
Yeah.
almost to me was really important because otherwise, I've been in organizations where it's just like, okay, AI is the new cost lever, and that's the long road to the bottom.
I think as well, like when you start going down that path, and if you don't even have visibility of what's changed, it's also chaotic. So like there's also like a view of you want to look at the AI opportunity, predict where to go, have a map that sends you in like a direction, but then like you don't want a, shadow AI, you don't want like all of this like chaotic mess. And if that stuff is not working, you have to have a visibility layer to be able to shut stuff down.
Yeah, I mean
Um,
that's mission critical. Otherwise, you're just, putting things into the work process and not evaluating whether they're actually delivering impact. As I think about work that's again back to like the levers that we've used over the last few years, it was really about like move to a distributed model, use teams all over the world, use low cost locations as much as possible.
yeah.
And while work was pushed to those locations, the work process itself never truly evolved to make real impact in, cost management, in changing people's roles per se. So I do think like this is going to force people to think differently about how they're going to do that. And having a platform like Rejig to see that and to get that real time transparency and visibility is actually like if as a COO and a mindset, like that's the holy grail, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just, presuming you're going to get some sort of an uptick.
Yeah, I've got like a little bit of a reaction to like the word transformation at the moment because it feels like a one-time thing. It feels
Yeah.
like a project, and I think that the world and this work is a forever now. Like you're not going to
Yeah.
do this once and then okay, we're done. Like
No,
everyone back to
no,
work. Like this is
yeah.
this is where it's like a forever, right?
Continually, right. Continue to iterate, which is also, if you think about like the world of when I think about my early days in like web design, we were using that waterfall methodology. It was like, okay, we did the design blueprint, we did the wireframes, and we locked it, and then we built it, and then we like pushed it live and we were done. And
Mhm.
then over the years, it became more about agile and incremental and continuation, right? And I think the companies that can start to move past those old sort of phase gates and move more towards agile and iterative, to your point, the transformation becomes ongoing and
Mhm.
ever evolving as opposed to, a one and done.
Yeah, yeah. And there's another scenario that I've seen play out, like someone will take a workflow and then they want to bake AI in for the sake of having AI. So then they're looking at all the subtask level. And in some instances, it takes longer than what it was before for the person. So part of this is like, where is it even valuable to go after?
Right.
Number one, what is the
Totally.
cost of doing this? Because to your point, like I design in my workforce strategy where I've got folks in Manila, I've got folks in Sydney, I've got folks in New York, and then I have like a lot of agent capacity across my team. And some instances, it's easier for me and cheaper for me to put something in Manila versus agent, which sounds kind of crazy, but that's just true.
Yeah,
So I
no,
think that's the that's
yeah,
the
that's
that's the business
valid.
right of like okay, and then you got to like redesign it so it's not just like AI for the sake of AI, right? Like is
Yeah.
this even worthwhile? Like, do we even do this enough? Like, if I am doing this task like once every week, is this enough for us even to care about, right? Like,
Agree. Agree. And that's where it's for me again, it's like where are we going to get the most bang for the buck? Where are we really going to make a material impact? Where is this, going to be something that is going to drive you know, a real improvement in ways of working versus, yeah, like we could dabble here, we could do this little thing here. Okay, great, fine. But like, does that really have any material change?
yeah,
And so I think, to your point, like AI, even though what you're talking about is designing at the task or subtask level, there's multiple layers of it, right? Like that's the underlying layer that sits in the workflow itself. But then there's big level thinking that is coming out of like the use of AI. I mean, I've always, for many years, the teams that have worked for me know like my holy grail is to get a dashboard with real-time insights and
yeah,
start to see predicting insights. Like
yeah.
when I have to look at like, oh, let's look at how we did last month. Okay, last month,
Like,
like that already happened. No, how are we going to do in the next future months,
yeah.
right? And how do we get ahead of that? And how do we start to course
What are
correct?
the key things that tell us we're about to head down that cliff again? Like, totally
Yeah.
agree.
I mean, and I've worked with incredible engineers and technologists over the years who always wanted to get to that point, but now with AI, like they can get there tomorrow. I mean,
Yeah,
like, here's my idea, like tomorrow, they're like, oh, we already created something for you.
Yeah.
That's super exciting. As a business leader, that's super exciting.
Given like you've got that view, looking forward like 3 years, like what do you hope organizations have figured out? Like what are the kind of key pillars that like need to be true for this moment to be as good as it could be?
I think those who are going to hold on to the past are going to get left behind. And working in big, large global organizations, there's multiple agendas, there's multiple aspects to these businesses that are, important and critical. And I think it's really going to require, the leadership at the top to come together from across all these different groups to align on understanding the importance of embracing this moment, embracing this change. I think those that, have carried us to this point are going to start to say like, okay, wait a minute, like I need to be curious and I need to start thinking about like, what does the future look like? So the companies that can like release that, going to be great, going to continue to evolve and deliver. And those that aren't willing to do that or adopt change, I think will become obsolete. They'll have had their moments, right?
Mhm.
So I don't know, 3 years from now, I'm sure work will look completely different.
Yeah.
Operating models will look completely different. Um, and again, I think that's only as good as, to your point, what you were saying before, is the companies that think about building those AI COEs, building the connections into the businesses and the leaders and the managers who are doing the work, and then driving the accountability and driving sort of the incentive for performance.
Yeah. Where do you think it sits? So like you've got like IT involvement, you've got HR that are kind of the work design kind of gurus as much as there is the guru, in
Yeah.
that, because it's like kind of new. Where do you think, like, where would you prefer to sit if you're building out this team? Like, where does it sit? Like,
I mean, I'm a big proponent of cross-functional teams. Like I think if it's sitting in one group, you're not going to get the actual pull through that you need. I believe that you probably need to have it come together where it's, either one tied into a transformation lead or some sort of COO or operating strategy
mhm.
individual. And then it's a cross section of technology and information, information officers, groups within them. I think HR, anybody who understands roles and skills. But then I think, again, I'll come with my background where for many years I led like program and project management, where I understood like process, work product, how to flow things through. You used to get like a Lean Six Sigma, right?
Yeah,
Sort of qualification. People who understand how to re-engineer work
yeah,
need to be part of it. So to me, it's really like this cross section of like athletes who come from these various backgrounds that come together into that AI COE. And then having those, like I'll call like maybe that's the hub, and having the nodes that sit in the business groups, in the business units, in the functions that exist in the organization, who are really going to go up and down the chain of like what's happening in that group to build out that
mhm,
AI strategy and see it all the way through.
mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
We do see, like, across a lot of our customers, actually, we see this kind of new team that's forming under the CHRO. So it's like a work innovation team, and
Yeah.
it's kind of like there's kind of, I don't know what to call them yet, but like think of them as one is the work architects. They're the folks that are
Right.
kind of
Yeah.
doing the wiring of the company, and they understand the job architecture, the tasks, the rules, that part you said. And then you have these like work engineers, work designers. They're the ones that are kind of doing that process redesign, workflow redesign, and then they buddy up with the tech builders, like whoever the builder is. Some customers are putting the builders in this team, some are like putting them in the business, some are getting them IT. Doesn't matter, but they're working towards that. That's becoming a pretty common thing that I'm seeing, and even starting to see like CIO reporting to CHRO now, where there's
Mhm.
like this view of capability is like
Right.
agent and people. So it's
Yeah.
definitely, I think a lot of people are trying to figure out where it goes. But to your point, it's cross-functional. Like it's doesn't really matter where it sits as long as it's got the expertise and capability
Right.
to do those parts, right?
Yeah, correct. And as long as it's cross-functional, so you're getting that like athlete sort of player in that group who can think through all of those three components. And then it's also, to your point, and I'll go back to like the Agile Scrum model, it's like working and sitting with the teams and doing it together in real time, and then doing sprints and seeing where you are at the end of a few weeks. So
Mhm.
it's really, I think, starting to go from like just creating something in a centralized function to really sitting and doing the actual change within the day-to-day, the way the world works and the business is working.
Yeah, the one part I haven't like kind of figured out in my head yet is, so to your point about the bringing the people on the journey. So if we go and we reinvent a new way of working, let's say a new AI workflow to pay the invoice, you've got 100 people doing that. Who's responsible for making sure the 100 people know how to work? So we have built in the product, I think of like an SOP. It's the
Yep.
step-by-step guide for folks to kind of be
Yep.
brought on the journey, and they get to collaborate with the SOP and they get to chat to it if they're unsure, like, hey, like what part do I do what? So that's like new.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to figure out like who's responsible for making sure that folks, one, do that, two, know the new expectations, because that's the part we talked about at the start of this show, right? Was how do you tell Jane that, Jane, did you know that we're expecting X now more invoices paid? Or let's say we're not going to bring in more invoices. Where does Jane now spend her time? Like who, like where does that part sit?
I mean, well, one, I think the leaders need to be the ones, reiterating that like we are going to change the way that we operate and work. That doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to lose your role. You're just going to work and do things differently. And I think having the right leaders, the right change agents who know how to drive that into the groups is going to be super important. The role of HR becomes super important, right? It's like helping people understand, okay, now my job function changed. What is my new job description? What are the skills that I have? What are the skills that I need?
Mhm.
So I think it's all of the above, right? It's like getting the people function, the HR function to help recast that role for that individual.
Yeah,
The leader and
I
the
love the
manager.
recasting.
Yeah, it's the leader and the manager really saying like we're looking to adopt a new way of working where we're asking you to be accountable to help
Mhm.
delivering that. And then we're going to make sure to also not just invest in the new ways of working, but invest in you as our employee and
Mhm.
giving you the skills, giving you the resources and bringing you along. Again, that's why I always say it's like people who I want to change the way that they're working, I'm going to get them in a room and we're going to start workshopping it and we're going to design it together. Whenever I've had to do something at like a global scale, we'll always think about like, how do I bring in that global team and voices, create a task force and group that can bring different points of view, but shape something together and get to that like 80-20 rule.
Yeah.
When you do that, I think you also create the people become your advocate as you go back out into the organization and they can say, oh, well, you know what? Like I brought them our special needs and requirements.
Mhm.
And they thought about that through the flow, or this is how this is being addressed. So there's more like stakeholdering, there's more, collective design that's happening. And hopefully, and again, I think people start to feel like excited when they become part of it. So it feels like a reward versus like something's being taken away.
Mhm. Do you think, and I don't know what to do about this, so like, let's say I have all the visibility of all the work that happens in your company. I know the impact of AI in the short, medium, long term. Do you think like we should give that, like, how should we tell the employees that? Like, how much do you be honest and trying, like, what would we, like, because I kind of struggle with like, how much do you freak people out
Right.
versus how much do you know that something is about like on our plan to change and then communicate, and this is again why HR, I think the two things bolt in together. One, we're going to
Yeah.
redesign the work, but also we're going to redesign your path forward, or what did you call it, recasting? I love that. At what point, do you have that conversation with your
Yeah.
people? Because I remember when I first started my very first product, what was so like interestingly scary to me was even when people were being made redundant, there was a low chance of redeployment and a very low chance, and these were probably 45-year-old plus
Yeah.
folks, where there would have in Australia they've got laws around age protection as well for career. And like there's certain levels of scrutiny that happen around that. So like we were very much so paying attention. And what actually was really interesting was that even when folks were being made redundant, they weren't taking action to go in and actually complete profiles and do these things, which I used to look at and think, I think someone's just being like genuinely like rabbit in the headlights, scared of like what to like, when someone gets completely like just like, because I couldn't understand how, like what happens in that next phase and how do you make sure that people are able to move into that next iteration of their career. And if folks are not engaging because they're afraid, or I don't know the reason, that was my assumption. That's kind of like where I sit and go, do I give my data? Would that freak everybody out? Do I tell them at the moment that they need it? Or like I'm trying to like figure out like, how do I be responsible and what advice?
You know what? Like I've always felt better about transparency versus like withholding. But at the same time, it depends on like the time horizon for a lot of the change. I do think there's been fear every time there's something new. Like I remember, in my early career, I was working for the digital agency and we are part of a conglomerate and a traditional agency. And we were treated like, the like, stepchild who was not important, right? Like digital is a nothing. We own the brand. We own, the traditional advertising. We own the client relationship. And over those years, like I started to see, okay, wait a minute, digital's starting to become more important. Digital's becoming the lead. Traditional like branding is less, right? And the people that I had as friends who had come from that world, either one, they embraced it and they said, you're right, I've got to learn it. It's here now. Or the ones who are just like, I don't want to learn. I love I love what I do. Like I love print, I love print advertising. Okay, great. But if you don't start to learn in this space, you are going to be obsolete. And so sort of similarly, like I think people need to understand that this is where things are going. Have that transparency, but also make sure that like you're bringing people along with you and you're going to help them get to a place where they could start to embrace it. And if they don't want to embrace it, fine, eject, right? Tap out. But ultimately, and what I've always seen in my career is every year there's a new emerging trend. There's new emerging technology. You can either choose to like turtle and like not embrace it and be like, that's a non-thing, or you could at least be curious, you could engage and start to learn. And I do think that like everyone's on their own career journey. So it's for those individuals who are on that career journey who want to continue to be curious, to learn and improve. Those are the ones that are going to continue to go forward no matter how old you are. But those who are just like, no, I like the way that I've always done things. Okay, well, the world's going to evolve. And either,
I think the AI leaders, I think they kind of shot themselves a little bit in the foot because they were so catastrophically negative about the tool they were selling. This was the thing that blew my mind. And then they were suddenly expecting that people would not be petrified and not want to adopt it. I think that was like the biggest failure of leadership on their behalf, because what they've ended up doing is slowing down the potential of like, sure, they're growing at a rapid pace, but like, just because someone buys the product doesn't mean that they're using the product. And, like if you could go and sell a whole pile of licenses, people got to like embed this into a way of working or they will not stay with that product. It's only a matter of time, right?
Like, I think that there was a lot of fear mongering around. So all felt like it's just going to take your jobs versus actually this is an enabler to make you better at your job.
Right. And it was so see for someone like me. So my background, I come from workforce strategy. I come from HR. I have no technical background whatsoever. But here I am building a massively big and opportunistic AI company. Like I am the perfect example of what is possible with AI. And like I was so frustrated because I was like, you're killing it. Like you're killing the moment for everybody to adopt this and embrace it. So my view was like, yes, there will be risks that we've got to manage, but the greatest opportunity that we have is for everyone to become a builder. Like imagine being able to build, like the freedom.
Super exciting. And again, there's always people that I've experienced throughout my career who are like tinkerers, who will embrace and build and try. And then there are others who just like, don't have that curiosity and they do work differently. But for those who do really see the opportunity in this moment, this is going to be this is going to be
I
really
agree.
exciting. Like build new things, try new things, think about all of the blockers and the barriers that you've had to get work done or do the idea that you thought of. And now with AI, like it's just a way to unlock it sooner and make it
Yeah.
reality.
And anything is
And it's
possible.
now, right? It's disseminated and dispersed. When
Yeah.
AI first came out, it was like Watson, right? It was like very
Mhm.
contained. Now it's for the everyman.
Yeah. And what's really funny is watching them backpedal now, where it's like they're getting ready for IPO. So it's like they're don't go a little bit.
Right? Of course.
It's really
Yeah.
too. It's like so predictable. It's like really funny. But we didn't have to do that. That was like one day I'll make my point heard. But like that didn't need to happen. And now what we've got is like a whole pile of folks who are petrified about the opportunity. And now we've got to work harder to get them to adopt into a new way of working, which just causes a problem, right? And I think
Yeah.
I commercially didn't understand that. Like you're freaking people out about the thing that you're selling. It doesn't make any sense. Like usually like you kind of sell it, you don't like put people off. So I don't know if there was some like backwards marketing strategy on that.
Right.
Right? Like, do you
Yeah.
know what I
I
mean?
don't
Like
know. Kind of
what was the
backfired to
goal?
your point. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
like these are not like these are smart people. So it was kind of like, I don't know. Like what is interesting is like I feel like you, me, all of the folks on this call, we all have a responsibility to work with our companies and make sure that they're going to be really bold and make
Right.
sure they're going to innovate. But also like we can also be really responsible at the same time and make sure we don't leave our people behind. And I think
Yeah.
that's the
Right.
opportunity.
And that's the opportunity. When you do both, that's where you win, right? Because companies that, again, the best companies that I've been part of, when you bring people along with you, when you understand their specialties and commitments and contributions, and you continue to invest in them, they all drive revenue and growth and
Yeah.
and new and exciting projects and adventures, right? Otherwise, like, okay, then you just became a commoditized organization that just uses like the vanilla adoption of the
Mhm.
enterprise tool and the AI solution for sure.
Yeah. And I can tell you, like, just from my revenue growth,
Hmm.
companies want to be afraid of companies like mine.
Yeah,
Like the speed that I move at, the pace that I'm bringing on revenue, my margins,
yeah,
like I'm cash flow positive. I'm doing things that a company of my scale shouldn't be doing yet. And that genuinely comes down to good work design. Like we haven't figured
totally.
everything out. We haven't cracked it. I'm not like sitting here on my soapbox thinking we're amazing. But I can tell you right now, against a big Navy ship style company, I will win every time.
Well, right. I mean, but to your point, like those big organizations need to think with like that old kind of incubator mentality, which is
Mhm.
all right. It's like even though there is that big ship that's always got to keep, it's going to keep moving. If you do not carve out money, people, support, commitment, you will not be able to make those inroads and start to incubate and work in ways that your organization will work. And again, those are the companies that I think are just going to get left behind
Mhm.
because they've focused on the way that they've already been doing things. And then one day they're going to wake up and be like, oh my God, like one, people aren't buying this X, Y, and Z anymore in the same way
Yep.
they've been buying it. And I haven't evolved my business. So now what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it is really interesting. Like to your point, the trend changes. Like imagine the rate at which AI is also getting better and the capacity available to like do more and more work. Like this is where it's like, this is the worst, like today is the worst it'll ever be. It's going to get better every day. So it's kind of like this like sudden shift. Most of the folks that watch this show and listen in on their Pelotons in the morning, these are all like really strong HR folks
Yeah.
who are really curious and want to be part of building out this bold, responsible, this new team. Given you have worked cross tech in the business, but your heart has sat within HR and you have a fond like connection to that group, Sometimes I find it a little bit difficult to cut through some of the legacy in HR. And like, I think there is this percentage of the HR population who are seeing the opportunity and they're running towards it and they're pioneering. But then there's like a broader group. Like if you were to be coaching, the HR community, like what are the mindsets and the things that you think are really important that we got to learn from you to be taken seriously? If I wanted to build this team, let's say I come to you in the business and I say, my background's workforce strategy. Robyn, I think that we need a business line that does this. I've got the background. I can do this. We're going to save millions of dollars, bringing in, external resources. We've got to do this forever. What mindset and things would you kind of recommend that everyone here, including me, like has to have, learned from, etc.?
Well, I'll start with your initial point, which was just like the HR organization. I do think that HR has rapidly evolved over the last several years, right? Even from when I, sort of made that pivot into the people function. The people function, is so ripe for modernization, right? They're so ripe for changing the ways in which they do things. And so many, HR organizations, they have their centers of excellence, and then they have their HR business partners and their talent advisors. And I think the centers of excellence are always the ones that are going to push. They're going to push to embrace this. They're going to push to think about how do they use technology, because a lot of what they likely provide for the whole of the organization sits there. I think the companies, the part of the business that, I'd love to see start to feel like they own this more are the talent advisors. All those are those individuals who now are advising leaders and business function groups on what kind of change do they need to see in their people? Do they need to see in the output of those organizations and those people? And like, how do you really change that sort of makeup of individual, as opposed to like what you've always looked like for in the past?
You mean like HRBP kind of role, talent? Yeah. We are seeing
Like,
that
I
actually
think
appear as a thing.
that's the key, right? Because they understand, they have the connections to the people, and they understand how the work gets done, and they understand like who's an up and coming leader and or who needs some professional development. And it's in those individuals that I think HR can really get to a place of being almost like the lead for this, AI transformation, the lead for driving real material shifts in organizational structures and layers and spans, et cetera. So anyone who's thinking about like, putting something like this into HR, really lean into that group and really give them all the skills and training that they need to feel like they can advise, right? As many CEOs, for sure.
I think this is like honestly the most exciting career moment ever. Like
Yeah.
if I wasn't doing this, I would be coming to you and I'd be saying, listen, there is an opportunity right now for us to do this and build the capability within our business. And we can set really good metrics in place to make sure that the ROI of the team is in place, that we will create an awesome service line into the business, that they don't have to go and borrow expertise outside, that we create a new infrastructure and architecture so our company is running off the same data set so that when we reinvent, it triggers and tells the talent team that actually work has changed. So like for me, like I think this is the most exciting moment for folks in HR.
If you are passionate about this and you enjoy what you're doing, in terms of like being at the forefront of driving an organization towards a real new era, right? Absolutely. And in big companies, there are definitely people who get it and understand it. I just think that like, at least in the companies that I've been in, I think that like we're often the ones advising clients on how to use these things, and you don't always like eat your own dog food and focus on yourselves. So right now it's like those companies that are doing that externally need to take a lens, turn it inside, and start to really unlock, the opportunity within their own organization.
Yeah. And I think your kind of profile is the perfect example of like what you call it, like a chief work officer or whatever it's being described as.
Whatever you want to call it, right?
Like whatever it is, like there is this role that exists to sit like in the organization. And I think every company is going to end up having someone like you who will be driving this out. And I think that's if this doesn't go to plan, like I'm going to call you. I'm going to work for you.
Please, please. Yeah. So to your point though, right? I think what you guys are providing is a fantastic unlock within any organization. I think the consultants are helping me drive sort of the strategy, but having that group that sits in a company that really can think about bringing together that cross-functional team to go in and really get it done and deliver is going to be critical. So anytime you need me to help,
No, we are so grateful to have you.
yeah,
I do
absolutely.
think I do think what's going to be really important is like how we start to focus on like sharing all of our learnings as fast as possible to the community so that folks get to really start like learning from that. Robyn, it has been honestly the most incredible conversation. I could keep you here for hours and days and weeks just talking about this topic. Thank you for everything you do for the community. Thank you for all of the work that we've done together. We're so grateful that you've had the experience that you've had so that you can share it with all of us. And you can find
Sure.
we'll share with everybody after, like, your LinkedIn and some context from this conversation as well. But thank you, Robyn.
No, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. Always good to see you, Siobhan. Thank you.
See you, folks. Have a good day.
Bye, everyone.